Chapter 7. A Death in the Family. Despite the efforts of Torrijos, there was no indication at the start of the Reagan administration that he was receiving any respect from the U.S. government. In particular, his efforts for rapprochement with Fidel Castro were scorned by Washington. Torrijos thought that he could serve as a conduit to bring Cuba back into the fold. "Every moment of Cuban isolation equals years of shame for the American continent," he said on more than one occasion. Reagan, who had just been elected, saw this as further justification for his opposition to the canal treaties. "Frankly, it is incredible that we are thinking of taking the critical step of turning over the Panama Canal when Torrijos maintains such close relations with Fidel Castro and the Soviet Union," Reagan said. "We are faced with a man who systematically violates the rights of his own people. He and his group came to power at the point of a bayonet by toppling an elected president. He now controls the press, has prescribed the political parties, with the exception of the Communist Party and his own, which is controlled by the armed forces." His vice president, George Bush, agreed. Torrijos is becoming a Latin American Gaddafi by supporting and providing financial aid to terrorist guerrillas. He has open headquarters for liberation and terrorist movements, hidden in Panamanian embassies like those of Libya, the Polisarios, and the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. General Torrijos had called routinely into command headquarters from Rio Alto on the Pacific coast that Friday morning, July 31, 1981, to check in. "We had a skeleton staff on duty, as was the custom. Our extended weekend started after 11 a.m. on Fridays." "Nothing new, General, sir," I said to him. So little was going on that we drifted away from official subjects, nothing to do with the military or politics at all. Plain gossip, mostly about secretaries. One of them was the beautiful Celia, Torrijos' favorite, with her ebony skin and long eyelashes. Then there was another one of the secretaries who had married Lichito Castrillon, Torrijos' helicopter pilot. The newlyweds were off on their honeymoon. It was a relaxed time for all of us now that the treaties were signed and passed. The average workload at the General Command had decreased noticeably. Omar had gotten much more involved in politics. He had said that signing the canal treaties was like earning his master's degree. Now he was going to work. He was developing a plan of action for the future. Part of his plan involved identifying up-and-coming civilian and military leaders. Young intellectuals were sent to study in England, the United States, and elsewhere. He met with the old guard of the Democratic Revolutionary Party, urging them to develop new strategies for the future. He was also choosing prominent members of the military, assigning them to social action projects, farming development, welfare and political education programs in peasant areas. Anybody who says they knew exactly what Torrijos had in mind would not be telling the truth. He never told us, but we could see what he was doing. On the personal level, he had a backup plan. He had set up a modern, comfortable office for himself in a duplex adjacent to his house in Altos de Golf. He invested money to purchase antennas and other gear so that he could set up a national TV network. Torrijos had time for everything. He was happier than I had ever seen him, more lighthearted and joking around all the time. He was watching his family grow, thrilled that his new grandson would be baptized with his name, Omar Efrain, proud of his new daughter, Tuira, given the indigenous name of Panama's largest river. Omar's schedule involved meetings with athletes, native artists, composers, and folk singers. Distinguished visitors from Colombia and Venezuela were always passing through. There were always 2 places set for visitors at the beach house. Torrijos loved to offer hospitality to guests. He was becoming a statesman with a diverse group of political visitors. In the weeks prior to his death, there was a delegation from the Nicaraguan Sandinista leadership. "Get out of the trenches," he told one of the leaders. "Make it a political battle. The guerrilla war has been won," he told his Nicaraguan guests, who were deferential because Torrijos was one of their oldest supporters. There also had been a visit by American General Vernon Walters. Walters had served as deputy director when George Bush was chief of the intelligence agency. It was part of a reconciliation with U.S. intelligence agencies. For the 12 years after the U.S. involvement in the 1969 coup against him, Torrijos had shunned intelligence officials. Now, following ratification of the Panama Canal treaties, he had signaled the change by giving a medal to Arthur Esparza, the chief of the U.S. Army 470th Intelligence Group, for his efforts toward passage of the treaties. Torrijos was becoming an important world player. His mediation could have cooled the fires and averted the dirty wars that, with billions of dollars of American aid and support, killed more than 100,000 people. Torrijos had taken some time off at his getaway beach house in Rio Hato, and from there decided to take a drive with a small group of people to the town of Penonomé. He told the local commander, Major Elias Castillo, to set up a get-together with friends, local politicians, and military leaders. He then ordered that his Twin Otter aircraft be flown into Rio Hato to pick him up. The idea was that he would make an impromptu visit to Coclecito, a small farming community he had special affection for across the mountains along the Atlantic coast, then come back for the evening festivities. Torrijos had funded a kind of social economic commune for farm families in Coclecito, with experimental crops and a project to raise Brazilian Cebu cattle. The quick decision left El Cholito Adames, who was due to be rotated out, with the job of flying Torrijos on the hop back and forth. Everyone knew the drill when Torrijos was in the area. The schedule was always subject to change and invariably announced at the last minute. There was no flight plan. That was the last anyone saw of Torrijos. When it got late, Castillo became concerned and called ahead to Coclecito. He found that the plane had never gotten there. The Air Force started checking the vicinity, well aware of Torrijos' penchant for changing his mind and not telling anyone. They radioed the nearby settlements of Santa Isabel, Salvador, and others, but no one had seen the general. They even called Cali and Choco, Colombia, in case Torrijos had gone off on a surprise visit. By nightfall, Colonel Florencio Flores, second in command, declared a national alert. The Air Force, under Major Alberto Purcell, immediately started a search and rescue operation, working into the night with no trace of the missing plane. The next day, the first information came from a peasant in the area of the valley of Cerro Marta, outside the assumed flight path to Coclecito, who reported the sound of an explosion around the time the plane was assumed to have gone down. Purcell sent reconnaissance planes and helicopters, which found the tree-covered crash site. The plane's front section burrowed into the side of the hill, the fuselage sliced off by trees. Torrijos and his entourage had been killed instantly. Cutting a path through difficult terrain, an infantry rescue team, accompanied by a pathologist, Dr. Ruiz Valdez, carried the bodies down from the mountain as the nation heard the news. The judicial and legal investigations were handled by Attorney General Olmedo Miranda, one of Torrijos' best friends, who had known him ever since the days they served together in Chiriquí. The military team responsible for maintaining the Twin Otter aircraft conducted its investigation in conjunction with an international air safety team. No evidence of sabotage was found, despite rumors of U.S. involvement. Torrijos' tomb is at Fort Amador, not far from the Panama Canal, which he wrested from American control, changing the course of Panamanian history.